Okay, question number one. First of all, welcome to class number 2 of Journey. I'm still stuck in the past. So welcome to class number 2 of the Jewish course of why. 7 questions down, 43 questions to go. We hope you enjoyed. And like I said, some of you weren't here last week. It's not so much about answers, it's more about perspective, because an answer has to sit well with you, and we'll try our best to answer your questions. How are you, Sam? All right, so the first question is, we'll do one question, and then if you guys want to change the order, we'll go from there. The first question is, why is the Star of David a Jewish symbol? We know it's on the Israeli flag. It's on a bunch of places, but how did the Star of David become a Jewish symbol? Now, when you think of Star of David, what do you think of? First thing, what? Israel, right? Usually Israel. It's the six-pointed 2 triangles interlinking with each other. So what's interesting is that the history behind the Star of David there's a lot of mystery. We don't know exactly the connection between Judaism and the Star of David. In fact, a lot of people say that in the beginning there was no connection between the Star of David and the Jewish people. I was reading an article today in preparation. It says that the early Christian churches also had this symbol in it. It's only later on, the whole history, how that came, was only really to the late 1800s, where this symbol became as a star, as known specifically as a Jewish star. But even so, Moshe Feinstein, look at text number 1. You can open your book, by the way. In text number 1 on page 48, he says like this. That was only for class number 1. He says like this. It's well known that the Star of David has been used on our curtains and Torah covers for centuries without controversy. So whether it's a Jewish symbol or not, well, the controversy hasn't been for many years, so why start now? But he says like this. Interestingly, he adds, Moshe Feinstein, by the way, for those who don't know, he was the leading halachic authority in the 20th century. I actually have some of his books over here. All questions in Jewish life post the Holocaust were sent to his desk. He lived in the Lower East Side. He's known as Moshe Feinstein. He's very, 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 he passed away in the mid-80s. So he says like this, and he continues and he says, in fact, that he said maybe it's not literal or it's conceptual. He says that the fact that the Star of David has two separate triangles. So one triangle represents the Torah. The other triangle represents, actually I'm running ahead a little bit here. Other triangle represents God's the encompassing reign. So what would happen is like this. So you have one of the things we believe in is the Shema. And the Shema, the last word of Shema is Echad, right? What do we say? What are we saying in the Shema? We say, Hear, O Israel, God is one. And then we say Echad. Now the rabbis teach us that Echad is an abbreviation. We have Aleph, which is 1. Aleph is the first letter. It's also a number, standing for God. Chet, which is Kabbalah tells us there's 7 heavens and 1 earth. It's Kabbalistic. And Dalid is the 4 corners of the earth. Basically, the symbol of David represents that God is the one boss in all 6 directions. He's the boss. And what David had on his shield was, because it's not called the Star of David. In Hebrew, it's called the Magen David. Magen means a shield. So what David had when he went into battle, it wasn't so much what he had on his shield. It could be he had nothing on his shield, right? But what he went into battle thinking was that God is in control, and whatever he wants to happen is going to happen. If I win, it's because of him. If I lose, it's also because of him. So it's not so much literal, he argues. It's more conceptual, and therefore God's in control, so I have nothing to fear. That's answer number 1. Answer number 2. I ran ahead with the slideshow. You see in text number 2. Text number 2 is another rabbi from the turn of the century, Shlomo Zalman Erech, and he says like this. He says that the Jewish people are made up of 3 groups of people: Cohen, Levi, and Israel. The Torah is made up of 3 parts. You have the Torah, the 5 books of Moshe. You have the books of the prophets, and you have the Chronicles or Scriptures. And then even in Torah, you can have the written law, the oral law, and the Kabbalistic law. Right? It's made up of three. So he says like this. So you have one triangle, and which is the Torah, and the other triangle, which is the Jewish people, and they overlap each other. You can't have one without the other. The Jewish people don't exist without Torah, and the Torah doesn't exist without the Jewish people. And the reason why it's called the Star of David, because David personified that. Because it's very easy for a king to run away with himself and thinking, well, I'm the boss. In the words of Mel Brooks, it's good to be the king. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know. Right? If you don't know, get an education. Right? Next Tuesday, don't come to this class. Right? But it's very easy for kings to run away with their ego. But so what he said was that, no, I'm a king, but I represent the Torah. In fact, there's an interesting law that a king had to write for himself a Torah scroll. Every king had to write for himself a Torah scroll. And that Torah scroll, a Torah had to go with him wherever he went. It's one of the 613 mitzvot of the Torah. A king had to write a Torah and had to go with him. Why? To show him that, listen here, you're the king and you're the boss, but remember, you work for me. Similarly, in this week's Parsha, it says like this. It says, you shall fear your mother and your father. I'm God. So the obvious question is, I know you're God. What does I got to do with my mother and father? So the commentaries tell us, because you have to listen to your parents only until they tell you to violate what I say. Because your parents work for me too. So if your parents tell you to do something that goes against the Torah, you don't listen. So similarly over here, the king had to remember that he was the king, but the Torah comes first. And also this year, interestingly, is the year of Hakel. Hakel means gathering, where all Jewish people, men, women, and children, had to go to the temple in Jerusalem. Can you imagine? Every Jewish person. It was once every 7 years. It was a tremendous sight. And the king would get up on a platform and he would read parts of the Torah. So just to overlap the concept of the kingdom of man with the Torah. And that's why the two triangles were interlinked with each other. So your reign, your being the king and the boss, King David saying he was the first real king. He was a king over everybody. And King Shaul was also, but it was only 2 years. It was very tumultuous. So that's what King David is trying to say. Okay. Then we're going to skip the third answer. We're going to go to page 52. The Ramah, his name is Rav Moshe Isserles. And he is the foremost Ashkenazic at the Ashkenazic authority. So for those of you who are Sephardic, you'll know the Bet Yosef, Yosef Karo. He wrote a code of Jewish law in Tzvat. And it said, the legend is that at the same time, the Ramah was writing a code of Jewish law in Germany. And they didn't know about each other because this is the 1500s. And when a rabbi writes a book, he wants to get acclamation from the other rabbis. So he sent it to the leading halachic authority of Ashkenazim, the Ramah. The Ramah is finishing up his work, and all of a sudden the mail comes in, and it's a copy of the Shulchan Aruch. He's like, what? I just wrote this. So he said, because that was first, I'm not going to come out with a competing book. He only put in his notes of where Ashkenazic and Sephardic customs differ. If you want, I can show you in the Shulchan Aruch. Anyway, so the Ramah writes like this. He says, the Magen David wasn't a star at all. In fact, David's shield didn't have a star. It had a menorah. Check out what he says in text number 4. We hold the tradition that a menorah adorned David's shield because the merit of David's study. Why? Where is the menorah? So he says the menorah had 3 legs. He says, the Torah says, the menorah has 3 legs. But those 3 legs stands for 3 important principles in Judaism. Without these 3 principles, Judaism can't stand. Number 1, God exists. And he created and creates in the world, and he controls it. Right? You got to believe that. You don't believe that, it's a non-starter. Number 2, that God communicated with man. If you don't believe that, then we don't know what we're doing here. We're lost in the dark in the forest. Number 3, that we have free choice. You have to believe we have free choice. We don't believe in we're controlled robots. So, and interesting, by the way. One of the Kabbalists write that if you look at the first 3 episodes in the Torah, it brings out this concept. What the first episode in the Torah is? Creation. Number 2, we have God communicating with man, with Adam. That's prophecy. And number 3, we have the episode where Cain kills Abel. Man has free choice. So it's in the Torah. So we see over here that King David was saying that the menorah, that the belief in God, that is what it's going to believe, what's going to lead us. So he says the whole star, it's one has nothing to do with the other. There are actually some people that say, I was reading, that the menorah was adorned with a flower design. It was a golden flower, and some people say that the menorah had a six-pointed flower. It's kind of like a lily. A lily spreads out in different directions. So that's where the menorah and the six-pointed design connect. But again, it's a theory, and no one knows if that's true. Okay, all good? Did we answer the question? Any questions before we go on?
How early are people talking about a Jewish star? When does this start appearing in writings?
Okay, so like I said, I read that there was a place of worship that was used until the 5th century by the regular Jewish community and the early Christians, and they had the Jewish star. I forgot where I read it because all the information is kind of all mixed up in my head. But there's a place where there's this Jewish star, a really old, I forgot where it is, and there's a swastika right next to it. The swastika, by the way, is not a Nazi symbol. It's way older than that. So the question is where it becomes strictly Jewish. It really picks up steam in the late 1800s when the Zionist movement chose to adopt it as its symbol. The menorah was always, if you find old coins, it's the menorah on it, not so much the star. That's why the modern Israeli shekel was molded after they found coins from 2,500 years ago. So the modern Israeli shekel coins are molded after those coins. So you notice the Israeli coins don't have a star on it; they have a menorah on it. That was always the Jewish symbol. And on the Arch of Titus, there's not a menorah. They're not carrying a Jewish star; they're carrying a menorah. So basically, what I was reading today is that historically, it's kind of been used for both.
Okay, so like the synagogues all over Europe in the 1600s and stuff like that, they did not have.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, we're actually going to talk sort of when talking about prayer. Paintings and pictures in prayer in shuls were frowned upon because you're supposed to concentrate, not get distracted by everything. So like I said, the Moshe Feinstein said it's been around for centuries, a few hundred years. So again, it's there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of historical. If you want, I'll send you. Someone sent me copies of a book. There's a series of books. It's called Encyclopedia Judaica. Every Judaic concept, it's really in Hebrew, but they started translating it, and they talk about this also. So I can send you the copies, and they also have pictures from old archaeological finds where it has the Star of David. Okay. Now, question: are we good? Can we move on to next question? Grab a book. You're getting tested later. Okay. Who knows what a mikveh is? I don't know. Everybody knows what a mikveh is? Yes? A mikveh is a spa. Way before there was Mother's Day gift certificates, and we had a spa. Mikveh is a body of water. It has to be a natural water, either rainwater or a spring. And when a person is impure, they have to go to the mikveh. Now, for example, in modern times, when a woman menstruates, she has a period. So a woman cannot be intimate with her husband before she goes to the mikveh. That's one use. Number 2 is when a person wants to convert, they have to go to the mikveh. Question is why? Why are we jumping into a pool of water? What does it got to prove? In a temple, by the way, for those of you who have been to Jerusalem in the past 20 years, and they've done excavations on the southern side. That means if you're looking at the western wall, to the right, they've done excavations there. They found the mikveh. In fact, You go to in Israel, they found a lot of mikvahs, ancient mikvahs. Why? Because purity and impurity was a very big deal back then. If you were a Kohen and someone gave you what's called teruma, if you were a regular guy like me, so you had to give some of your produce to the Kohen and to the Levi. But that produce you gave to the Kohen was sacred, was holy, and a Kohen was only allowed to eat it in a state of purity. For example, so you had to go to the mikveh. If you brought a sacrifice in the temple, well, before you even went to the temple, you had to go to the mikveh. If you partake in the sacrifice, you have to go to the mikveh. So in the temple times, it was used a lot. But now, well, why are we what are we getting purified from? What's the mikveh necessary? Okay. So Maimonides, the Rambam, I don't think I have to tell you who Maimonides is, right? He built a hospital in New York. Right. So Maimonides writes in the laws of mikvahs that it's a chayk. How am I feeling? I'm not so good. You guys have to keep on top of me with the slideshow. Here we go. So Maimonides writes that it's a chayk. A chayk is a statute. Doesn't make sense. God says, why? Because I told you so. Right? We all, those of us that have kids, why? Because I said so. And I went to the story. A guy was talking about kids. He asked his kid to do something. Kid says, do I have to? He says, yes, you do. I didn't ask you if you want to do it. I remember when I was a teacher and I used to think out loud. Kids, oh no, we want the test on Tuesday. I said, this isn't a restaurant. You don't have a menu. There's no, I tell you how it works and I give the test when I want, right? So God said, you become spiritually impure, you go to a body of water. Now, spiritually impure doesn't mean you become dirty. Nothing to do with being physical dirt. You can be a very clean person, but spiritually dirty. You could be physically dirty, but spiritually clean. So he says, text number 5 on page 53, no reason. It's a divine decree. There's certain things that God says you're going to understand, and they're going to agree with you, and there's certain things they're not going to agree with you. And if you're serving God, you got to be okay with that. That's part of serving God. If you do everything only that makes sense to you, you're not serving God. You're serving yourself. Make sense? So that's one reason. But based on what we said last week, that we're supposed to ask why even when we don't understand why, that's a very Jewish thing to do, right? It says you're not going to understand, but why? But anyway, why, right? So there are some reasons. There are some rationale, some reasons given. Check out text number 6. There's a very, very famous Kabbalistic sefer, and you read this book, it puts you in your place. If you're feeling high and mighty, read this book and it'll shrink you down to size. In fact, the Rebbe said that everybody has to read this book before they get married, just in case you're going into a new stage in your life and you think you're going to put down your foot. Read this book. Anyway, so the book it's actually 3 volumes, and he says like this. And he says that just like before a baby is born, it's surrounded by the amniotic fluid, and then it's born anew, it's born clean slate. So too, we want to have a clean slate. We go into a body of water, just like the amniotic fluid, and then we come out renewed. And he says it's very appropriate for a person to do teshuvah, a person to repent. In fact, the women who do go to the mikveh, when they go to the mikveh, that's a very opportune time. When they're standing in the mikveh, it's a very opportune time for them to make a prayer. They could pray for whatever they want. Why? Because it's at that point where they're experiencing renewal and they're at the holiest point. So that's what he says. It's about renewal. If you look at text 6b, the Sefer HaChinuch, which we don't know who wrote it. It's a book that it's attributed to many people, but we don't know exactly who wrote it. It's a book explaining the mitzvot, all 613. You'll see on the top it says mitzvah 173. And so we don't know what writes it. He says like this. Very similar, but different, but more on a cosmic level. He says that you look at day number 1, it says that God created the world, the heavens and the earth, and then it says, and the Spirit of God was hovering above the water. Right, there was water everywhere, and it was only later that he separated the waters, and then there was earth. So the same way that the world was created and then the earth emerged from the water, also the concept of renewal. So when you go to the mikveh, you go into the body of water, you're starting all afresh and you're starting new. So that's why we go to the mikveh. Because if you're going to change, you got to turn over a new leaf. You say, that's not me. I'm a new person. I go into the body of water now, and now I'm something else. Good? Okay. Chassidus. Where we go?
Yigael Yadin served as Israel's second chief of staff until 1952, when at the age of 35, he began his career as one of Israel's foremost archaeologists, operating extensively in the Dead Sea region. Between 1963 and 1965, he led an expedition to excavate Masada, now one of Israel's most popular tourist sites. Masada is an impressive but isolated flat-top formation with forbidding cliffs rising some 1,300 feet from the Judean desert. Neither human nor nature had touched much of Masada for 2 millennia. Yigael discovered elaborate palaces and heavy fortifications built by King Herod of Judea between 37 to 31 BCE. He unearthed evidence of a Roman garrison that was stationed there prior to the First Jewish-Roman War that began in 66 CE, and that was defeated by rebels early in the revolt against Roman rule in the Holy Land. Yigael revealed breathtaking evidence of Masada's fall in 73 CE, when 15,000 troops of the Roman 10th Legion besieged the final bastion of Jewish independence in the homeland. The Legion constructed an enormous ramp up its western cliff and breached Masada. They found the fortress eerily empty. Men, women, and children had chosen to end their lives rather than fall into Roman hands. Among the artifacts, Yigael discovered one of Israel's most ancient synagogues, built to face Jerusalem, as well as tefillin, fragments of the Torah, Psalms, and Ezekiel's prophecy of the resurrection. Most surprisingly, Yadin uncovered a carefully constructed kosher mikveh for ritual immersion. Masada's open-air mikveh was remarkably well built, with a series of broad plastered stairs leading into the depth of a pool fed by rainwater. A spacious dressing area surrounds the mikveh. The site is protected by thick stone walls set with large cavities to serve as cubbies to hold clothing and personal items. For convenience, the mikveh was located in proximity to the rebels' dwellings along Masada's southern edge. Jews have been building mikvahs ever since Sinai, under every condition and in the most unlikely places. But this was a first. Hundreds of feet in the air under a blazing Judean sun, with sand stretching for miles below in a rocky desert, and where water is scarce. Moreover, this mikveh was built by besieged rebels, holding out against the might of Rome, when the entire land had fallen in flames and the Second Temple in Jerusalem had been razed to the ground. Masada is symbolic of Jewish revival. In IDF ceremonies, Jewish soldiers declare, "Masada shall not fall again." The fortress echoes with celebrations of Jewish life, weddings, bar mitzvahs, Torah scroll completions. But Masada itself has an inbuilt message of timeless continuity. Its ancient mikveh stands as poignant testimony to the Jewish people's untiring loyalty to the mitzvah, synonymous with Jewish procreation and continuity. A mitzvah the Jews kept faithfully, and that in turn preserved the Jewish soul throughout the ages.
All right. Wish him a happy birthday. It's his birthday today.
Thank you.
So he's turning 21. He can drink beer. Anniversary of his birthday. Exactly. Exactly. All right. Okay. So one theory, one answer we said that a person's like a fetus in the womb. enclosed in the water. Another one was returned to its primordial state when existence was enveloped by water. Chassidus says something a little different. Let's get a little Kabbalistic here. So screw on your white hats, your Kabbalistic hat. On page 54. He says, if you look at the world is divided in two. You have the revealed part of the world and the hidden part of the world. And it's something it says in Kabbalah is everything you see on land has its counterpart in sea. The only difference is in the sea, you can't see it. So the sea represents everything that's there. We just can't see it. But the sea represents something even greater. Everything in the sea has to be in the sea in order to live. It's attached to its life force. And it knows what its life force is. Here on Earth, everything that's on land seems like an independent being. But in reality, it's really dependent. Everyone still with me? Okay. So for example, a fish is from the world. It's from the world of hidden things. In the Kabbalistic terms, it's called Alma de Iskasia, the hidden world. Humanity is from the world of Alma de Iskalia, revealed state. So, for example, angels are from the hidden world. Angels don't do anything wrong because they are in the constant awareness of what their source is, just like a fish. We make mistakes. Why do we make mistakes? Because we don't feel our source. If we always felt our source, which is God, which tells us what's right and what's wrong, then we would never do what's wrong. Why do we do things that are wrong? Because sometimes we forget who we really are and what we're supposed to do, right? So we go to the mikveh and we revert to the world Alma. We revert to the Alma de Iskasia, the hidden world. You see, look at text 7a and 7b on page 55. In the beginning, water encompassed all of existence. What is now dry land was subsumed in the sea, until God said, let the waters gather, let the land appear. So what happened? God revealed the land. When God revealed the land, that meant that created an illusion of independence. Because if you think about it, we're also dependent on oxygen. Just like a fish is surrounded by its source of life, water, we're also surrounded by our source of life, oxygen. You just can't see oxygen. Well, to the naked eye, you can't see oxygen. There's always one guy. Well, if you right. So when God pulled back the waters in creation, it seemed like we're independent. So when we go into the mikveh, we immerse in the mikveh, we heighten our awareness that everything is submerged in godliness. Meaning that there's nothing in the world that is disconnected from God. Can be, because God is the source of life. And anything that's disconnected from godliness automatically equals death, which we'll get to, which leads us into the next topic. You see, the Shneir Zalman of Liadi finishes it off in text 7b. It says, when human beings, dwellers of the world, it sense independence from God, immersed in a mikveh, which represents a subsumed state of existence, they return to the original source. Because think about it. When you're in water, you can't breathe. You can hold your breath, but you can't breathe. So what are you doing when you go into the water? You're giving yourself up. You're saying, I'm dependent. You're saying, I rely on something else. You are acknowledging your fragile nature. And that's good. It's good to recognize that we're dependent, fragile people. Now, people think they can do everything. Those are the ones that get into trouble. Okay? All right. So that, yeah, go ahead. Yes. That's actually, it's called the sauna. It's called the schwitz. It's called the schwitz. Right. Sure. So this is, thank you very much, Doug, for the segue into the next question. Why do we need purification? Who needs purification? So in temple times, men and women, everyone had to go to the mikveh. If you wanted to go to the temple, you have to go to the mikveh. In fact, today, most religious people, observant people, will not go on the other side of the Western Wall. You know, you can go to the other side of the Western Wall, but most observant people won't, because we're not allowed to go on the Temple Mount unless we go through a purification ceremony. Or to those who are familiar with the red heifer, sprinkling of ashes, it's a whole ceremony. You can't just go to the mikveh and go. There are some scholars today who claim, and I'm not using that word saying that they don't know, I'm saying I don't know. They claim they know exactly where the Temple Mount is. So for example, I learned once a week with an observant doctor, and he took a tour, and the law is that you're not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Jews are not allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. Well, again, it's going to cause problems. But he wanted to say Kaddish. So what did he do? So while he was leading the tour of observant people, he said, Yiskadav, Yiskadash Mirabah. So he made it look like he was leading a tour, but he really was saying Kaddish. So no one would know what was going on. So men would need to go to the mikveh. These days, it's a custom. In fact, by Hasidim, we go to the mikveh every single day. But everybody, even if you're not Chassid, everybody goes to the mikveh at least Erev Yom Kippur. It's a custom. Everyone goes to the mikveh of Erev Yom Kippur. The question is why? So based on what we said before about renewal, so if you're a convert and you're becoming Jewish, right? So you're starting life anew. So you have to go to the mikveh, Erev Yom Kippur. You want God to give you a good year, you go to the mikveh. But what about a woman? So why does she go to the mikveh? A woman has a baby, she has to go to the mikveh. A woman has a period, she has to go to the mikveh. Why? What did she do to become impure? To become that she has to go to the mikveh? So look at text number 8. The Kotzker Rebbe lived in the 1800s, and he was known as a very, very, very sharp person. And he once said, I'm trying to remember, that's what they said about him. It's 2 things the Kotzker Rebbe couldn't understand: falsehood and fools. And someone said, it's actually the same thing, right? He was very, very sharp, right? And he said like this, and he said a tremendous insight. Page 57. And he says, the reason why women go to the mikveh, become tameh, is because childbirth is such a miracle. For a child to be born healthy and normal, it's such a miracle. It can't happen unless God is there to help. It can't happen. So God equals life and purity. So what happened when God leaves? What fills that vacuum? Impurity. So therefore, it's not that the woman does anything to make herself impure. No, that God was present during this great miracle of childbirth. And now, mazel tov, the baby's born, everything's okay. God's like, okay, now I gotta, I have seas to split and bread to fall from heaven. I got other jobs to do, right? So Kabbalah tells us that where there's absence of God, there's impurity. There's certain things that only God could control. You'll see in the text. The Gemara says there's certain things only God could control. Just 3 things. It means to holy people, he gave blessings. People would go to a holy person and say, my wife can't have a baby, give a blessing, to become pregnant. But the concept of praying for rain was always there. Look at the second blessing in the Amidah. It says that's called the bracha, the blessing of might, of God's control. And what do we mention in that blessing? Blessing for rain. Only God controls rain. And also the blessing for the resurrection of the dead. There's a story, the great story with Elisha, also with Eliyahu, but it's more in detail with Elisha. When Elisha gave a woman a blessing to have a child, and the child died. So the woman went to Elisha and said, I didn't ask you for the blessing. You gave me the blessing, and now the child dies. That's not fair. So Elisha goes and prays to God, and God says, no, I'm sorry. I gave you the power to bless people. This is not this key I don't give out easily. So Elisha said, "Kill trade," and the whole story there, how he brought the child back to life. It's straight out scripture. This is not the medrash. This is straight out scripture. So, but there's certain things that only God could control. God controls childbirth, and we see that Rachel couldn't become pregnant unless God decided to become pregnant. So, because there's the miracle of life, and then afterwards there's an absence of godliness. But let's put it simpler. I come from the city, New York City. When I say the city, sorry, that's very egotistical. I'm from New York. So is there any other city aside from New York, right? You know, right? So I come from New York City. Do you know when all the crime happens in New York? During the summer. You want to know why? Because the kids are sitting out there on the stoop, right? And by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they're bored. And when you're bored, bad things happen. Just by the way, this week in my neighborhood, some bored kids lit a bus on fire. I didn't tell you why. And they were little kids. Why? Because they're bored. When you're bored, I know, I got into trouble too. When you're bored, bad things happen, right? Same thing. God is good, God is life. Anti-God equals bad, impurity. So that's why a woman has to go to the mikveh. And it's not because she did anything wrong. A person does something wrong, you repent, you do teshuvah. Going to the mikveh, some women say, oh, I'm impure, I'm bad, I did something wrong. Nothing to do. You didn't do anything wrong. It's because you had company, and now your company left, so you're lacking. So you gotta go to the mikveh. Same thing is, by the way, the regarding a woman who has a period. Why does she become impure? Because what happens when a woman has a period? The egg that had the potential for life is sent out of the body. So you have the potential for life, and now that potential for life is being thrown out of the body. So the potential for life is gone. That equals it's a little bit, but that equals a little bit of death, and that's why she has to go to the mikveh. Similarly, we wash our hands when we wake up in the morning. You're familiar with that? Not only for bread. Everyone knows bread, you got to eat, right? But we wash our hands, we wake up in the morning. Why? Because when we're asleep, the Talmud tells us we're 1/60th dead. He's freaking out. Oh, really? Right. Well, think about it, right? If you're sleeping and I talk to you, do you answer me? No, you're unconscious. So there are similarities between the difference between a dead person and a live person is you come back. Unless you're my father trying to wake me up to go to shul in the morning, then there's no coming back, right? Before 11 o'clock. But there's some similarities between a sleeping person and the person who's not alive, right? They both have no consciousness, no rationale. That's why we have to wash our hands when we wake up. It's not a question of bad or good. It's a question of there's godliness and then there's lack of godliness, and that lack of godliness equals impurity, and then we have to get rid of that impurity. And that's why, and by the way, just to tie into what Doug asked, so why don't men go to the mikveh? Because men don't have to go to the Temple Mount today. In fact, if you lived in Israel in the old times, a man can live in the northern part of Israel and not go to the mikveh the whole year until he went to the temple, which is 3 times a year. But you can go months at a time without going to the mikveh. So, but a woman, for example, a woman doesn't have to go to the mikveh only if a woman and man want to what's the word I'm looking for? Want to embark on a journey such as intimacy, which according to Kabbalah is the holiest act in the world. So you want to do something holy, you got to go to the mikveh. A single girl doesn't have to go to the mikveh. You don't have to go to the mikveh. And a married woman, a woman who has a child, and let's say there's no man, whatever it is, for whatever reason, she doesn't have to go to the mikveh. She didn't do anything wrong. It's only when you want to begin something holy, then you got to immerse yourself. Okay. Is that okay? Could be next question? Because each topic is kind of not... Yeah, go ahead.
I heard also that the dishes, to make them kosher,
Right. Yeah. Right. The Torah says that when you buy something to bring them from the realm of impurity, because again, we still do the mitzvah, even though the Gentiles today aren't pagans. Back then, the Gentiles then were pagans, so we had no idea why they were making the dishes. So to bring them from the realm of impurity to purity, put them in the mikveh. But it doesn't make a difference. The Torah says we have to immerse all our dishes. Doesn't make a difference why. Then we still do it today. Yeah. So many mikvahs, you have the mikvah, and they'll see a sign, dishes mikvah around the back. In fact, I'm not going to say this online. No, it's it's not after not live. I'll tell you an embarrassing story. Okay. Yeah, I'm recording live. Saying it doesn't just stay in this room. You know what I'm saying? You got to remember the mic's always live. Okay. Here's another question. Why are there so many do's and don'ts in Judaism? So if God tells you, listen, you got to keep the Sabbath, you understand. There's one day a week you got to give, right? And God says, don't kill people, don't steal people. You know, you gotta love your neighbor. All this is godly. Does God really care how I get dressed? Do you know there's a Jewish way to get dressed? You put your right sleeve in first, because according to Kabbalah, right represent. I'm saying, look, open up the code of Jewish law, and in the bedroom, you think you can do whatever you want in the bedroom? There are laws. There are laws. How we sleep. Maimonides says you sleep on your left side. It's better for digestion. You wake up on your right. I'm telling you, there's nothing in your life that Judaism says, no, we don't have anything to say in the subject. Do whatever you want. Nothing. It's so invasive. What do you think God really cares if I tie my left shoe first or my right shoe first? You know which one you tie first? Your left. I'm just saying. Because you tie tefillin in your left hand. So what you tying? I'm telling you, there's everything. There's nothing that we don't do that's not Jewish. You know, I think, it's like when Reagan said, Reagan said, what's the scariest thing a person can hear? I'm from the government and I'm here to help, right? It seems like big government. God's telling you, don't worry, I'll tell you, I know better. I mean, come on. So I'll give you Shabbos, but if I want to eat, let me do what I want to do. Okay. So there's three understandings of this. Look at text 9a, 9b, and 9c on page 60, 61, and 62. And then you can go back to page 59 and you can see which one answers the question. The one answers the question best in your mind. Look at 9a, 9b, and 9c. See which one you like the best. We need the Jeopardy music to play in the background. Okay, as you guys are reading it, I'm just going to go over briefly what it says. So text 9a says that just like silver has imperfections, or metals, and you have to put it through a refining process, we all have imperfections. In every area of our life, we have imperfections. So every mitzvah is invasive because every area of our life needs refining. 9b basically says that through a mitzvah, we connect to God. And 9c says, we'll go into it deeper in a second. It says that every mitzvah, we make this world a place for godliness. We make this world a home for God. So which one do you think sits best with you? Which answer do you like best? No. That's such a C. You like C. This guy's been coming to Chabad for a while, so. That's the Hasidic answer. So what do you say? You can say whichever one you want. No pressure. No. Okay. Let's go through all three one or the other. In Judaism, as opposed to other people, we don't believe that a person is born bad. We believe a person is born with a tremendous amount of potential, right? Judaism teaches how great God is and how great a person can become. But there's work. There's elements in your life that are, to use a Yiddish term. Where's our expert? Mendel's not here. Expert in Yiddish. Grub. Grub means coarse, right? And the question is, how do you know if a particular behavior is productive or not? How do you know? Let me give you an example, right? You buy a car, and you go to put in gas. You know what it says over there? Unleaded fuel only. You think to yourself, excuse me, it's my car. I'll decide what's right or wrong. Hey, go ahead, you can put in whatever you want. Diesel, apple juice. I mean, whatever you think, is actually these days gas is not so expensive, right? But you can do whatever you want. So what are they saying over there when they write these unleaded fuel only? We're the manufacturer. We're telling you how to get the best out of your engine, and the best thing to do is to put in gas. So God's telling you here, you want to do whatever you want. Like say in Yiddish, gesundheit. I'm speaking a lot of Yiddish tonight. Says you can do whatever you want, but if you want to grow, if you want steps to really grow, to really become a better person, better today than you were yesterday, then you got to listen to what I'm telling you. And that means, I remember, I know it's a little personal, but there was a kid growing up in my class I could never get along with. For some reason, he had it out for me, and we had a mutual friend. And I was once speaking to this mutual friend and said, I don't understand, what's his problem? I think I'm a nice guy. I think so. He's, nah, he's really a nice guy. Nah, ignore it. I said, no. It doesn't work that way. Nice people do nice things, right? That means if you're a good person, that goodness pervades your entire life. If I say, okay, 11 to 12 is my time for sinning, what does that mean? And now I could be an obnoxious person. 12 o'clock, Cinderella, now I go back, to being, it doesn't work that way. So the reason why there's mitzvot in every area of our life, because in every area of our life, we can use a little bit getting better, right? So here we go. Refine the one who performs them. So the whole point is to refine. Personal growth is the most relevant in the mundane, or is the most relevant in the mundane areas of life. That means you don't need refining in Shabbat. Shabbat is a holy day, right? Where we need refining is in how we eat, because you can have a person who sits down to eat. Have a person who sits down to. We all know in the most physical ways we conduct our lives. That's where we need the most refining. Does that make sense? That's where the Torah says, do it this way. And think about it this way. If we think before we do something, even the physical stuff we eat, for example, you make a bracha. What happens when you make a bracha before you eat? On the positive side, why do a lot of people struggle with food, cigarettes, alcohol, whatever it is that they can't control? Because they don't think before they do something, right? But when you have a blessing before you eat, for example, you have to think to yourself, do I really need to eat this? Right? So it helps us be control of ourselves. And when we can control ourselves, then we're truly growing. That's number one. Number two, the relationship with God. The problem with having a relationship with God is a relationship means you're two equals, sort of, right? Kind of. I mean, I'm friends with some people in your family, even though they're Red Sox fans, but that's only because we don't see each other that often, right? Right? But think of it, God is unlimited. We're limited. He's the creator, we're the creator. What do we have to talk about? There's nothing, it's like me trying to explain to my wife baseball. I'm telling you, it doesn't go anywhere. There's no one home. My wife's not American. It just doesn't work. So in theory, you're right. There can be a relationship. But God said, but I want a relationship. And because he's God, he can do whatever he wants. He can make the rules and break the rules. So he decided he wanted a relationship with us. He wants a relationship with us. So when I ask you to do something, and you do it, what that does is it forges a relationship. It brings us close. It brings us closer, right? It betroths in Mishlei. And King Solomon compares the relationship between God and the Jewish people to like a husband and wife. In fact, the Song of Songs, not Mishlei, sorry, Song of Songs, there was a whole controversy. Should that be part of the Torah? The whole controversy, should that be part of the holy books? Or should it be part of the Apocrypha? A lot of the rabbis were like, crazy song. Haven't you read the Song of Songs? It's all about love. What? Yeah, it's right. Yeah, it's erotic. Two young people running around in the garden. I mean, if you came in here and say, "Hey, Rabbi, read this," if my wife, caught me reading that. No, it's a Torah. It's okay, right? So the rabbis were like, this is not holy. Rabbi Akiva said, no. If you think the 5 books of the Torah are holy, this is the holiest of the holy. Why? Because this describes the love between God and the Jewish people. So what's really love? Love is when you do something not because you want it, because she wants. Right? So if, for example, one comedian said, love is about compromise. Let me give you an example. I wanted to go out to Italian. She wanted Chinese. So we compromised and we went to Chinese. Right? Love means when you do something because she wants it. Like now every day. Now Sunday was Mother's Day, right? Every guy, there's a whole line of guys in Walmart and Publix buying flowers. Now, speaking to the guys over here, to us guys, flowers, that doesn't make any sense. Boy, a flower, what's a flower? But why do you buy flowers? Because she wants the flowers, so buy your flowers. Because you're not asking yourself, what's going to make me happy? You're asking yourself, what's going to make her happy? And vice versa. I tell a story. It was one very rainy, miserable day. The guy owned the bakery, and it was already the afternoon. He said, okay, no one's coming out in this weather. I'm just going to close early. I'll go home. All of a sudden, as he's about to close, some guy comes in. It was pouring rain. He comes in. He says, 2 bagels. So he says, Bernie, you came here for 2 bagels? So who sent you? Who wants 2 bagels? It says my wife. Sorry. It says I ruined it. It says Beatrice wants 2 bagels. Says Beatrice is your wife? He said, well, you think my mother would send me out in such miserable weather? Right? So why do we do things? Love means we do it because our lover wants it. So God said, do it. Put on these funny black boxes on her head. We don't understand it. You want? I'll do it. Shake a branch. You want me to shake a branch? Shake a branch. Eat a cracker. Eat a cracker. Eat a cracker. Whatever. Because we're trying to make God happy. You want me to swing a chicken over her head? No problem. Whatever you want. So the crazier, the better. And in fact, this week's Parsha tells us that it's the crazier mitzvot that people have always tried to move us away from. Just be normal. So we're not trying to be normal. Right? We're trying to do what God asks. That's what a mitzvah does. Mitzvah comes from the word safta, which means connect. When we do a mitzvah, we're connecting to God. Why? Because He asked. Then there's the third thing. God is a spiritual guy, right? And in the realm of spirituality, He's everything, and everything is Him. And everything in the realm of spirituality knows that He's the boss. For example, do angels have free choice? Why not? Why don't angels have free choice? We don't work for God. Who do we work for? FPNL? Okay, but there are different levels in angels too. There's the archangels like Michael, and right. There's those guys, and then there's the the blue collar angels. The union angels, right? No, anybody think of this? Why are they angels? Why don't they have free choice? Why? The reason is because they're constantly aware of the presence of God. If you knew always that God was standing next to you, imagine your kid came home from school with a note and said, "Dear, Barbara, your son behaved beautifully in the principal's office today. Thank you for behaving. Why were you there in the first place, right? Right? There's no trick to behave in the principal's office when the principal's sitting there. It's in the schoolyard when you don't see the principal. That's the trick, right? So angels don't have free choice because they constantly, it says angels don't sit down. Whatever that means spiritually. Why? Because when God is in the room, you're going to sit down. How could you, right? But God created this world, this physical world, where we perceive ourselves as independent. We perceive there's God, and then there's me. And there's what God says, and then there's what I say. I also have an opinion. So we do a mitzvah, and why are we doing the mitzvah? Because God said, right? So what are we basically saying? We're bringing God down to this world. And that's why so many of the mitzvot are physical mitzvahs. Because what's the most external part of you? Your action. You have your thought, which is internal. Your speech, which is external, but it's not tangible. It's only hot air. the most external part of you is your action. And so many mitzvot on your action, because that's where we bring down God into this world. If someone sees you with a kippah on your head, or lighting a candle, or having strings coming out of your pants, say, why are you doing that? Because God asked me to. Oh, well, here's a guy who does things because God asks him to. So you're living with the presence and the acknowledgement of God. That's why it's so important to do mitzvot. See, I'm behind again. You guys. See, a true relationship is all encompassing. Mitzvot pertaining to Madan life create the most powerful home for God. Okay. On to item number 5. Can we go forward? Any questions? Are we good? Either I'm a very good teacher or you guys are falling asleep. So, press 1 for A, please, right? Okay, those of you who come to shul know that Jews do this all the time. The shuggling, shaking. Why? Why can't you just sit still? Huh?
They don't know if they're coming or going.
They're coming or going, right? I sound like my father. Just sit still, right? Why are Jews doing this when they're praying? In fact, I once heard a story of this Gentile kid who would hang around with this Jewish kid, and he was the only kid his age. So whenever the Jewish kid would learn, so he would sit there also because he had nothing else to do, and he started learning Gemara and everything else. So one time when he was having the test by some rabbi he was visiting, because he's not Jewish. So the father turned to the visiting rabbi, and said, "How do you know that kid wasn't Jewish? Because he doesn't do this. He doesn't do this, right?" So why did Jews do this? So the Kuzari, which is a very interesting book, I have it over here. It's a book about Jewish philosophy. He says it's historical, because in old days before the printing press, look at text 10, page 63. So he says because there was only one big book, and they were always moving up and down and moving around to try to read. And people saw it. Oh, that's the way you learn. You shake, you move. So. That's what he says. That's the historical. It's a nature of habit, because people saw it. That's one reason, which could be true. I'm not saying it's not, but everything has to have also. The Rebbe said everything we do, even if it's only a little historical significance, also has to have a spiritual significance. So look at text 11 on page 64. David Abudraham, who lived in Spain in the 1400s. 14th century, 1300s. He says the reason why we sway, or in Yiddish it's called shuckle. Well, that's English. Oh, is shuckle the English word? And I just heard it growing up. When you grow up in a Jewish neighborhood, certain words you don't know if they're, it's like the Chabad. We rent mobile homes, RVs, and we go around all over the place, invite people to put on tefillin. So we call them mitzvah tanks, right? So growing up, I thought that an RV was called a mitzvah tank. I never heard it, because no one in my neighborhood ever rented RVs. So when we wanted to rent it, for the Rebbe's birthday, we'd call up a place like, "Excuse me, do you have any mitzvah tanks?" It was like, "Any what?" "No, sorry, we're fresh out of tanks." So anyway, so I don't know what shuckle. Well, we'll stick with sway. So it says the reason why we sway is because when you're praying, your mind is praying. But what about your body? Because it says in Tehillim, all my limbs shall testify and say, God, who is like you. So therefore, it's a full body experience. We're doing the whole, not only our minds are serving God, our lips, but our whole body. We're serving God in its entirety. The Zohar says, another reason, text number 12, the Zohar says something else. If you remember last week, the last topic of the class, which was about the Yartzeit candle, which we said that the soul of man is like a candle. So just like a candle is flickering, right? A candle is never moving. So too the soul of man, which is a godly soul, is entrapped in the body. So sometimes what happens is the soul doesn't feel its source. It lays dormant. But what happens when the soul experiences godliness? What happens when the soul experiences something it's not used to? Let me give you an example. For all you guys biblical scholars out there, don't all answer at once. Do you ever notice that the 10 Commandments, the first 2 are spoken in second person? It says, "I am God, your God." then from 3 to 10, it says, "You shall not serve other gods aside for him." It's in third person. You ever noticed that? No? Well, the holiday of Shavuot is coming up. So we're going to read the 10 Commandments. We're also going to have ice cream and cheesecake. But whichever reason you come doesn't make a difference, right? Right? We don't hand out a survey when you walk in, right? So it says what happened was that the first 2 commandments God spoke to the Jewish people directly. And what happened was when God spoke to them was they died. The Jewish people, their souls just left them. It wasn't a punishment, because when the soul witnessed and experienced godliness, it didn't ask. The term in Kabbalah, it's called klois hanefesh. The soul just leaves. Just leaves. Doesn't ask questions. When it's experienced such holiness, it just leaves. Kind of like the candle. I once heard this. I don't know if it's true, but maybe you guys are adults. You can try this at home. I once heard that, when I heard it, my parents didn't let me try this at home, that if you take a large flame, torch, and you take a candle, the flame will jump from the candle to the torch, because fire wants to be included in its source. Same thing is that the candle is jumping because it wants to be included in the source. So what happens is, so normally you could be a regular person because you're not experiencing godliness. But the second you start praying, you start learning Torah, so your soul's like, let me out, let me out, let me out. See, I'm doing it right now. So so let me out of here. So that's why we shuckle when we learn, when we pray, because it's our soul's on fire, and it wants to get out, but it's being confined by the body, just like the candle to the just like the flicker of the candle on the wick. All right, and thus concludes question 5. Can we go on? Anything else? Good. Alan, don't
But
No.
why we bend in certain prayers?
Oh, in the Amida. Okay, the reason why we bend in the Amida, because it's at that time we're acknowledging God, so we bow. In fact, you should know, by the way, we bow down, but then we stand up. The king, when the king would say the Amida, he was not allowed to stand up, because he was in a constant state of acknowledgement. Because if the king stands up straight, saying, "I'm the king." But the king did the Amida, he had to do the whole thing bowing down. So we bow down to acknowledge, but we don't. I mean, if you think you're the king, then maybe you should stay bowing down.
But also in the Lechadodi, also we bend to it.
Yeah, because in the Chadodi we're welcoming the Shabbos queen. He says there's a special spiritual energy that enters only on Shabbat, and it comes from the west. The Shekhinah, if you noticed, which wall wasn't destroyed at the Holy Temple? The west. Because it says in Kabbalah that the Shekhinah, God's presence, always dwells in the west. If you look at the temple complex, like the pictures somewhere, yeah. If you look at the temple complex, the main hall, the main sanctuary was in the west.
That's because, that's because of the Western Wall and relating to that.
No,
That's the reason why it faces the west. If the temple was still standing and there were synagogues outside or temples outside, it wouldn't be facing so much the west.
No, I'm saying before the temple was destroyed, when they built the temple, or before that, when they built the Mishkan, right? The Mishkan, the temporary portable temple that they had with them in the desert, it was 150 feet long, right? That was the courtyard. Okay, the main part where the Holy of Holies was in the 75 western part. You understand? The model was like that. The rabbis tell us the fact that the western wall survived as opposed to the other walls is not a coincidence, because the Shekhinah is in the west. So when Shabbos comes in, we turn around to the west and we bow down to the Shekhinah. Yes, but not necessarily that's swaying. That's acknowledgement of.
Exactly.
Okay. Now we're going to get to a very simple, non-controversial topic, which I'm sure we'll go over so easy. So why is there separate seating? In fact, I don't even think we have to address it. Just skip it, right? Yeah. Why is there separate seating for men and women in Shul? So interestingly, there's a historian. He's one of the foremost historians. He's written many books about Judaism, American Judaism, the history. He's still alive. So he says that the whole concept of mixed seating is not even a Jewish thing. Even in the old churches, men and women sat separate. It only started in the 1700s, because in the 1700s, with the Enlightenment and with the emancipation, so then the moral standards of society started to fall, and people felt, the church felt, that in order to embolden the family and to make the family structure stronger, they should pray together. And that's where it came. The family prays together, stays together. You see, text number 13, page 66. He basically lines this out. He said the family pew was one of these new forms of raising the family status over that of a single individual, and by symbolically linking family values to religious values, the family pew demonstrated a separate seating did not, that the church stood behind the family structure 100%. But in reality, men and women never sat together. Okay, fine. But now that we understand the history, so you look at the question on page 67. But it seems like a good, right? If we all come to shul together and we sit together, that seems very nice. It adds, camaraderie and love and yada, 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 whatever it is that the relationship needs, right? You sit together, hold hands, and you pray to God. Okay. The answer is like this. The answer is in the statement. Why did the church advocate sitting together? Because the family structure was falling apart. But our family structure never came from the shul. Our family structure always came from the home. We don't learn Judaism in shul. You're in shul for what? An hour in the morning, an hour at night, and 3 hours, depending on the rabbi's speech on Shabbos. Right? That's not. Where's the structure? At home. Why is the Jewish woman called the foundation of the Jewish religion? Because if I ask you what's the foundation of Jewish religion, if you tell me, what's the most fundamental mitzvot we have to do? Guys, come on. Throw me a bone here, right? All right? What's the most kosher, right? Who decides what comes into the kitchen? Right? If a woman comes home to her husband and says, "That's it, we're buying new dishes." What's the husband going to say? No. She probably doesn't even notice. I got new dishes. Oh, really? I didn't notice, right? And who decides, where the kids go to school? Who makes sure? Who's always telling the kids, make sure? Growing up, my father, was left early in the morning, came home, in the evening. Who made sure I cleaned up my room and I did my homework? It was my mother. And it's not like my mother worked too. She worked, part time, but it's the mother in regular circumstances that makes sure that the family structure is there, whatever it is. I mean, when I was growing up, I couldn't go to the park on Friday until I cleaned my room. Right? It wasn't my father. If I didn't clean my room, then it was my father. Right? But so structure, not only Jewish structure, altogether family structure happens at home. If you need to go to shul to find out family structure, then there's something wrong. But structure has never been our problem. That's never been the Jewish problem. It's particularly because that we have structure of education at home, and we have strong family values at home. So when you come to shul, you don't need to sit next to your family. You know something? You need a break. I tell a story of a rabbi who decided, that's it, that by the Kiddush, men and women are going to sit together. It lasted all 2 weeks. What happened? His wife was saying, "Don't eat that." You don't need that. Okay, now men and women are going to, there goes the end. And you think about it. The Rebbe instituted 10 campaigns. It's hanging right outside. There's a board there with 10 mitzvot. Mezuzah at home, kosher at home, learning Torah at home, house full of books, mikveh. All those things all have to do at home. Judaism has never been threatened by the family structure. So this way, we don't need the shul to tell us that we need to be together. It's not true. Look at text 14. Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, was a rabbi in the 1800s in Germany. In Germany in the 1800s, Judaism was under assault, not by the Gentiles, by the Jews. So 40% of the German population in Germany in the 1800s converted to Christianity. That's then the whole reform movement is based in Germany. So he stood almost by himself against the assimilation. So he says, it's from your home. It's from your home that you learn to be holy. Think of it like this: in the Beis Hamikdash, they had windows, no glass, but the walls are very, very thick to the Beis Hamikdash. So in ancient times, any of you guys been to the old city? Yeah, you've been to the old city. If you notice, when you're coming into when you're outside the old city, there's a slit, like a small slot, and the other side of the wall, the windows open towards the inside, right? You notice that? Yes. Pay attention. In the olden days, they wanted light to come into the house, and they still wanted privacy. So they have a small slit in the stone, and then it would gradually get bigger, so the light should spread out in the home. In the Beis Hamikdash, it was the opposite. It was thin on the inside and wide on the outside, because the message was that holiness is spreading from here into the whole world. So what he's saying over here is that you have your structure, your holiness at home, and therefore you go out into the world and you're not threatened. You see, he brings over here the concept of Yaakov. He says when Yaakov left, he left. What did he do? He said he left his home, which is his first night away from home. And when he stayed overnight, he said, "I'm going to pray." Because why? He said, "I have a very strong religious background. I don't need I don't need other influences." So the problem begins when there's no practice at home. So when there's no practice at home, then you need to come to shul. Then there's a problem sitting together. So you ask my wife if she wants to sit next to me in shul. Crazy. She wants to, I don't sit next to him at home, but I'm going to sit next to him in shul, right? Okay. Right. So there's no need to sit. There's no need for them to sit together in shul. So when you practice at home, shul becomes. And also, think like this: people now coming to shul became a whole social affair. Right? So if I'm going to talk to somebody, I might as well talk to my wife. But I don't know how to break this to you, but you're not supposed to talk in shul. What? It's in the fine print. You're supposed to come to shul to pray. That's why you come to shul. But problem is, people come to shul and they're talking about, the Yankees, and talking about the Heat. They're playing tonight? Tomorrow. Okay. Right. I want to know, the people who didn't come tonight, they can't tell me, I was watching the Heat game, right? Right? So people find all these things to talk about in shul. So people say, wait, if I'm going to talk to somebody, I'll talk to my wife. But that's not what you're supposed to do in shul. And that's what leads into text number 15. It says in the Gemara, when we pray, we have to know who we're praying to. It means you're praying to God. It's a serious time. It's not a time to talk and to get distracted. You got to know what's going on over here. And think about it, human beings, people, we get distracted very easily, right? If I'm holding up a book with words and some beautiful woman walks by, right? It's a very nice printed book, but weighing one against the other, Rav Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, he once said, he was known as the advocate for the Jewish people. He said, God, you pulled off a good trick. You're a very smart guy, but it's not fair. This is what he said before Rosh Hashanah. He said, you put all the sins and the pleasures and everything wrong outside in this world, and you promised us, the Garden of Eden and all this stuff, you put that in the books. Of course, what's everyone going to pick? A book? Or, what's on TV? If you would have put the Garden of Eden outside and all the bad stuff in the book, then, we wouldn't do anything wrong. So really, it's not our fault. It's your fault. That's the way you created the world. So you have no choice but to sign us up for a good year. It worked, right? But coming to shul is not about distraction. It's a serious time. Davening, which is Yiddish for prayer, it's actually not. It's the real word in Hebrew is avoda, service. It's called avoda shebalev, the service of the heart. You concentrate on what you're supposed to do. It's not a time to socialize with men, and with men, it's easy to say, go fly a kite. When men and women are sitting together, then it becomes a lot harder. And there are laws, by the way, not just about women, altogether. All these different laws that are put in place that a person shouldn't get distracted. You can't look yourself in the mirror, right? Windows shouldn't be placed at eye level. I didn't build the place, so I didn't. We're only renting. God willing, one day we'll have our own place. Why? Because again, you look outside the window. So it's so the concept of a mechitza. One of the things I've always said, the beauty of Judaism is it deals with humanity the way we are, not the way we'd like to be, the way we are. The fact of the matter is that the genders are attracted to each other. You can say whatever you want. That's the way nature is. And prayer is you're trying to imbue in your life something doesn't come easily, right? God doesn't come easy. Steak comes easily, right? No one has to tell you eat the steak unless you're a vegetarian, right? No one has to tell you if you don't eat the steak or else, right? My father never had to tell me that. You better eat the steak or you're gonna get clep. My father did tell me, you don't get up, I'm gonna pour this bucket of water on your face, right? So that conversation did happen, right? So realistically, when you want to concentrate, right? Like I was preparing for this class, I shut off my phone, right? You go out to dinner sometimes. I'm sure you go out to dinner with a friend. But how many people you see, they're on their phones? Are they giving each other attention? They're not giving each other attention. Doesn't God deserve the same? You shouldn't get distracted. So and the fact of the matter is, other people, and especially the other gender, is distracted. It doesn't make one better than the other. The fact of the matter is, we keep them separated. And I heard once a woman say, this is coming from a woman, the chitza is not to separate men and women, but to separate both of them unto God. It gives you a chance to dedicate yourself without worrying what is, what are the Jones thinking. So, in today's time, where men and women do everything together, mechitza can be a hard pill to swallow. But the more you think about it, the more you realize that, hey, maybe they had, by the way, just to put myself in trouble, mechitza was an invented thing. In the first temple, there was no mechitza. You know what happened? Can you imagine? In the temple, in the holiest place on earth, there were problems. Can you imagine? Because not talking about Pembroke Pines, right? Talk about in the holiest place on earth, in the holy temple, there was a problem with men and women. That's when they built a balcony for the woman. They realized, and it says in the Gemara, that's the greatest day in Jewish history. They built the balcony because that separated the sins, bad things from happening. So if you think about it, put the emotion out of it, it actually makes a lot of sense. Any rejection, refutation, comments? Good?
Why do you keep saying the five?
Same reason. Because what better time to have mechitza when people are drinking alcohol? You should know the Gemara says that in the old days they had policemen. That these days policemen give you speeding tickets. In the Jewish state, the policemen would walk around in the parks because usually men and women, they're busy. They don't have time to get into trouble. But on Yom Tov or by a party on a holiday, that's when you let your guard down. So they would walk around and make sure that nothing was going on. So yeah, it's a fact. It's a time where you're enjoying yourself. You're letting down your guard. It's not a time to. Yeah. It's a good question. I should. Yeah. In many places the men sit at one table. Yeah, you're right. It's not in the smaller settings. It's not a necessity. Smaller settings. It's a necessity in larger settings. You should know, by the way, the concept of eating separate is a new phenomenon. At my parents' wedding, the men and women ate together. Only dancing is different. Dancing is, you can understand. It's not sneeze, it's not modest. But in the old days, in the 60s, it's only a added custom that, in fact, most rabbis, God willing, at your wedding, you don't have to have separate seating. Because he wants to be extra careful. That's what a religious person wants to do. But it's still a kosher wedding if you don't have separate seating. All right. You, kid, you're in the food business. All right. You make sure it's kosher food. Okay. Question number 7. Wow, it's very late. Okay, question number 7. Why do we care about Israel so much? No, what do you say? Why is Israel so important to us? Come on, this one, I gotta get some feedback on this one. Why is Israel so important to us?
God's gift.
I wasn't expecting that.
For me, or you wasn't?
I was expecting something a lot more current. I was expecting some kind of Holocaust answer. That's what usually people say. Oh, the Jewish people, what? They have a place to go, right? Do you know, by the way, that before, when they were discussing a place for the Jewish people in the early 1900s, they discussed Argentina, Cyprus, and Uganda. You notice? Can you imagine? Can you imagine going to Argentina? Huh? Madagascar. See, God wanted me to go back to the state of Israel. He had me marry an Argentinian. So if you ask an Argentinian what's the promised land, they'll tell you. They're not embarrassed to say. If you know an Argentinian, they know. There's nothing like an Argentinian ego. So if you ask South Americans, yes or no? See, I'm not making this up, right? Right. Anyway, so a lot of people, if you can write down learning exercise in page number 70. It's late, right? So you'll say, but the problem with all those is, then if it was only there for a place for security, then what do we care where it is? It's not a place for security, but we care about the state of Israel and also refuge. That's where you go for refuge. That's the most hostile place in the world. Good land, bad neighbors. Right? And also, it's not even a religious place. The state of Israel is not run by religious people. But the real answer is, well, this isn't other stuff. Is aside from Jewish people need a place to live, which is true. We need a place that we call on. That's our history. When you go there, that's where. Remember, I'll never forget this. I was in Israel for the summer, and the summer is always the 9th day of Av, which we commemorate the destruction of the temple. You know how surreal it is to sit by the Western Wall, commemorating the destruction. You think to yourself, 2,000 years ago. Uh-oh. So 2,000 years ago, the destruction happened right there. Right where I was sitting. That's exactly where it happened. It's unbelievable. I mean, just the history. You see King David's palace. I mean, it's mind blowing. It's not just something out of the. Think about it. You go to Washington. Yay, 200 years. I mean, you're talking about thousands of years. And our holy temple stood there. And then, like you said, Doug, God promised it to us. But it's the place where godliness is the most accessible. But the question is, but why there? You couldn't pick anywhere else. For example, with oil. You're already giving us land. Couldn't. And right. No, but now they have no natural gas. Right. By the way, they just discovered. It says in the prophet somewhere that there's diamonds or whatever in Haifa. The Rebbe used to tell people, go dig over there. And they just found diamonds and rubies up in Haifa. Yeah. So it's interesting because in the Rebbe's world, what the Torah says is it was a reality. It's not a question. Anyway, they just found it. Anyway, but why Israel? But why Israel? Look at text number 16. So in the beginning. Sponsor a new laptop for the show.
We always pray towards Jerusalem.
It's true. We always pray towards Jerusalem. I tell you, but that's because it's holy. The question is why. All right. So whoever's watching this on YouTube is not going to get the whole class. That'll teach you. You better come to the class. So Rashi says, think about it. Let's say the Torah didn't tell you about the creation. Would you still believe that God created the world? Before you learned the Genesis, before you went to school, your mothers and fathers told you God created the world. You couldn't read the English or the Hebrew, but you still knew God created the world. So why did God tell us about the creation of the world? So Rashi says, the very first Rashi, text number 16. Why? Because he said, because there's going to come people who's going to say, interesting, Rashi wrote this 1,000 years ago. This is when the Jewish people were in exile for 1,000 years already. And in France in the 1100s, Jewish people didn't dream of having a Jewish state. They just wanted to make it to the next day. Jewish life meant nothing in France and in Germany. And he said, why? Because it's going to come a time where people are going to say you stole the land. So we say God created the world, and He gives it to whoever He wants. But think about it like this: the Jewish people, we keep the Torah whether before or after Israel, right? We got the Torah not in Israel. We keep the Torah after Israel. So there's something about Israel that's special. Look at text number 17. The Rebbe explains. The Rebbe explains this. He says that the whole purpose of the Jewish people going back is to make a dwelling place down here in this world. For this reason, the land of Israel was given to the Jewish people, a place where the mitzvah can find expression. And maybe an historian say, I think it's, look at text number 18. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan brings down that the land of Israel is the most strategic place in the world, right? I mean, now you have planes and everything, but back then, if you wanted to go from Europe, Asia to Africa, which all civilization were, you had to pass through Israel. So people would pass through Israel, and they would see everyone serving one God, everyone eating one kind of food, which is very irregular. Everybody serving one united front. They'll say, hey, there's something to these people. And they would hear about Jerusalem. They would hear about the temple. So in that way, the Jewish people became a light unto the nations. So yeah, you're right. God could have gave us Argentina, but then we'd be secluded in our corner there, and we'd be eating steak and having mate. But that's not really what God wants us to do. As lovely as it sounds, that's not really what we're here for. But he says in text number 18, and this is why the city of Jerusalem is the most holy, because that is where godliness is present down here. So that land helps us manifest the entire world into a godly place. And there's a story. One time, a follower of the Tzemach Tzedek wanted to emigrate to Israel. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, "Make Israel here. I mean, bring the holiness of the land where you want to be in a holy atmosphere. Create the holy atmosphere here. That's why we love the land of Israel." Okay, proto civilization. God's truth. Okay, here we go. Last one. Go ahead.
Why do some Lubavitch rabbis don't give that importance to Israel, or like they don't think that the way you're explaining this?
Okay. First of all, it's not a Lubavitch rabbi thing. It's not. Chabad, the Rebbe was the biggest advocate for Israel. The problem begins when you try to divorce the land of Israel from the Torah. When you try to make the land of Israel into an ideal of itself and try to say that we don't need the Torah observance now because now we have our land, it's a very big problem. The very sanctity of the land of Israel comes from the Torah, which is